Because fear has at least two elements I want to lift up today. One of which is weakness. When we're frightened, we feel weak compared to what frightens us. We feel overpowered or at least outnumbered, right? We don't feel up to the occasion. We feel vulnerable and weak. The other one is uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen, and it feels very precarious. I want to talk about these two things because we would all rather not feel weak, and we'd all rather not feel uncertain, and we always come up with ways to deal with them. But most of the time, they are to cover up the weakness and to cover up the uncertainty. Put on a brave face, whistle past a brave guard, that kind of thing. And so we are instructed, when you feel weak, don't let anyone on. Put up a brave front. When we're feeling uncertain, act as though you know what you're doing, because that way you won't be hurt. The trouble is when you do that often enough, it becomes the way you behave in general. We put on a front of strength when we don't feel it. We put on a front of certainty when we don't have it. And of course, when those are challenged, we redouble our efforts to sound more strong and more certain. And of course, we all know what happens when someone is pretending to be strong someone who tries too hard being strong ends up being a bully. In essence, frightening someone in order to deal with their own fear. And of course, someone who is absolutely certain of things becomes a zealot who cannot live with the idea that someone might be different from them. So that's what can happen. We can cover up our fear with the pretense of strength and the pretense of certainty, which is exactly why the Grinch matters, because when we think about it, that's exactly what he's going through. He's a lonesome, miserable creature on a very icy cave up on a mountain. And his only real way of dealing with life is to deny that it's bad. And the way he does that is to deny the reality of the Who's happiness. Don't they know this Christmas is an irrational thing, he is telling himself? In some ways, he's saying, they need to know better. Know as I do that Christmas is a humbug. He's very much of a Scroogey character, this Grinch, isn't he? But as you know, as the story unfolded, he got the cause and effect backward. It isn't the gifts and the merriment that cause the happiness. It's the happiness that causes the gifts and the merriment. And that's what made his puzzler so sore. And that's the moment when his heart grew, according to Seuss. He uses that phrase, the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight. Isn't that what fear feels like? You feel clenched, tightened. You feel safe, but enclosed, even imprisoned. Now let's turn back to Mary in the story. What woman is not frightened at the thought of pregnancy? Even when you want it. What's it going to do? What will it demand of me? In generations past, it was literally a life-risking proposal. Camille Paglia describes pregnancy as a form of demonic possession willingly chosen. A physician I read once said that we should think of pregnant women as being essentially a third gender because their body chemistry and everything that's normal about being a female becomes completely abnormal in pregnancy. And then you think about labor and delivery, how difficult and demanding they are. As I've told you before, my own grandmother, whom I never met, my father never met because she died as a result of childbirth, and that's in 1925, not on some prairie somewhere. It was in a hospital in a major city. Every woman who gets pregnant is wise to be afraid. But unlike the Grinch, a pregnant woman cannot hide her weakness or uncertainty very long at all. Her body just won't let her. She has no choice but to be weak in ways she's never been and uncertain in ways she's never seen. Her only option is to go through it. According to Luke, Mary went to see her cousin Elizabeth, also pregnant with John the Baptist, the same one that Gabriel told Joachim about. When the kinswomen meet, the text says they each felt the child move in their wombs, and Mary is possessed of an utterance. She literally becomes a glossolaliac because she comes out with this magnificent poem that would be suitable to Isaiah or Jeremiah. She says, "My soul magnifies the Lord." It's called the Magnificat. It's a beautiful text. And it doesn't talk about the baby at all. It says, "For the Mighty One has done great things for me. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation." Here's Mary, a pregnant woman, sounding like a prophet. "He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty." If you've ever been pregnant, did you ever feel like you were filled with the Holy Spirit and made prophetic utterances? I don't think so, but there are moments of powerful hope that come out in different ways. And this is a bold hope. This is a woman, remember, who is poor, and she's saying that God will lift up the poor, which didn't happen in her lifetime. Even now, the powerful are still on their thrones. The lowly are still pretty low. The hungry are still very hungry, and the rich are far from empty. It's a bold hope she has, well beyond her personal powers or her own experience. Let's remember that this is the Mary who in a few months will give birth in a barn. And yet she had hope. We reasonable types, meaning people at Fountain Street Church and others, we often wonder, how can anyone believe some of those exotic things that are promised in certain religions? Like, well, this story and the miraculous birth and the resurrection and all that stuff and the Last Judgment, my God, that's outlandish. I'll tell you why. People are frightened. And they need a great big hope, an outlandish hope, a preposterous promise to carry them through the days when they do not know if their life will be their own. Most of the world doesn't live from paycheck to paycheck. They live from meal to meal. And many who do have a job don't know if it will be there next month. And those who do have a roof may not have it next month. Can we blame them if they grasp at a great hope, an outlandish hope, something that takes them well beyond their world? And even we who have jobs and have families and are blessed with fortunes of good health, we still know that life is a precarious option. No less than 3 of our own have died in the past 10 days. And that reminds us that we too shall die. Now add in the drumbeat of cable news 24 hours a day and about the dreadful things in the world. We should all be afraid all of the time. Can you blame any of us if we grasp for a hope that can hold us together through the fear? But of course, even hopes can enclose us if we're not careful. In London last year, I was fortunate enough to see an exhibit about Shakespeare. And it had, at the very last, a book of Shakespeare's collected plays smuggled into Robben Island prison. Do you know what Robben Island prison is? If you've watched the news, it's where Nelson Mandela lived for 27 years. And the prisoners there sneakily passed the book from one to another to give themselves something to read. And each one would make notes in the margins as to which texts helped them the most. And Nelson Mandela circled one from Julius Caesar: "Cowards die many times before their deaths, the valiant taste of death but once." Why am I telling you this? That was his angelic message. That was his hope, that he would be able to endure until he could no longer endure, that he would not yield. And I'm asking you personally, what hope do you have that gets you going through the day when it's really hard, when there's fear, when there's pain? You all have one. And we don't tell each other because we're going to say, it sounds so silly. I feel embarrassed. And that happens to us as a church too. When people ask us what we're here for, we say, well, we don't make you believe anything. Excuse me. You're free to do whatever you want, but what is our hope? What is the hope that we do this for? Why do we do it? I can tell you. You are accepted. You matter. You belong. You are loved. None of us know this for sure, but we sure want it. And we'd like to hope that it's true, not just from our moms and our dads, or maybe just from our moms and our dads. We'd like to think that somehow we matter, that we're accepted, that we belong, that we're loved. That's still a long way off, yeah? It's a superhuman hope, in fact, isn't it? We can't do it by ourselves. But, the great thing about superhuman things is you don't need a superhero to do them. You just need more than one person and more than one lifetime. That's what Albert Camus said. Superhuman only means something that takes more than one lifetime to accomplish. Our great hope, our good news, our gospel, our silly thing that we're embarrassed to admit, the reason why we go around freeing minds and growing souls is that someday this place and other places, our lives, our world really will be a place where all of us are accepted, all of us matter, all of us belong, and all of us are loved. And yes, that's dumb, but it gets us through the day, and it gets us through tomorrow, and that's enough. And so may it be.